entrepreneurship is so glorified and rightly so. I mean, I love everything we do and I love our company and I couldn't see myself doing anything else, but it's not for everyone and it's quite daunting.
So if you were to share something with the audience that they might not know about you already, where would you start?
It's a good question. It's difficult because I share almost everything. I share workouts, I share like things I'm reading, things I'm doing to increase like cognitive performance, obviously all of my work. I would say something that I might share with other people that they might not know about me is that I'm an absolute cheapskate. I mean, I do not spend money on anything. I refuse to spend money on $7 coffees, avocado toast. I mean, I hardly even eat out. It's even with COVID and like the delivery, like DoorDash, it's so convenient and it's awesome and it's still pretty cheap. But I'm a Costco shopper. Like, I think there's this notion that if you're like a young entrepreneur, especially someone who is going to be like a very conversationalist male, like white dude, like that's typically the people that are spending money on useless stuff and like nice cars. And I drive a 2004 Nissan Xterra that I've had since I was 16 that I paid for through lawn mowing. So I think that's something that people would probably not understand. The only time I'll ever spend money on something is if it saves me time.
I love that. And I think the audience would definitely appreciate seeing how much character building those things bring into your life, because that's really setting you apart from your peers, I would say.
Yeah, certainly. I think something that I've come to grasp really early on in my career is just this notion that there's no amount of money I can make within the next 10 years that if I had spent that same time making whatever that dollar amount is, if I had spent that in career development and learning and growth, that I wouldn't be able to make that over my lifetime. And so I think once I understood that, it became more of a lesson about, look, the goal here is not just to learn more. So not only are you more intelligent person, and thus you have better relationships with people and your life tends to go better the more intelligent you are, but it's also one that if your end goal is to make money, which for a lot of people, unfortunately, that is the case, you know, whether they want to say it or not. For myself, not so much, but if that's your end goal, it's also a really ROI positive investment as well. So maybe spend 3 less hours a day working and spend that time towards career and personal development.
Right. And I had a guest on Winning Wednesday that shared that we're basically our greatest asset. So if we're not investing in ourselves, you know, a paycheck that you can get from an employer is probably more reliable than if you try to create a hustle out of thin air and hope that that will bring home 6 figures one day, you know? And I think people have this misconception or fantasy world about what being an entrepreneur is. And you're kind of breaking that a little bit, you know, by saying, hey, it's not all glamorous. I can't just blow my money however I want.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that entrepreneurship is so glorified and rightly so. I mean, I love everything we do and I love our company and I couldn't see myself doing anything else. But also at the end of the day, it's not for everyone and it's quite daunting. And if I didn't have the overhead where I did, where my overhead was, you know, just incredibly low and I could live cheap and we're in an industry where there's not a high barrier to entry, you know, we wouldn't be where we are today. And so, you know, I think I think there's this notion that entrepreneurship is so great and that side hustles are so great and so on. When in reality, I know people who have full-time jobs and are 45 years old and they made an incredible career for themselves and they wouldn't have it any other way. It's always the grass is always greener on the other side. And I think that's something that is really toxic among younger generations is this notion that like entrepreneurship is the greatest thing ever because Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and Gary Vee are some godlike characters, which, yeah, well, certainly like that can be the case in terms of media and press. I don't think a life worth living nor exploring nor being ambitious for with kind of that goal in mind is one that's headed in the right direction. So yeah, I mean, I think it's overrated and I think it needs to be a narrative that is rewritten.
I love that. And you touched on the low barrier to entry, right? So we see people becoming influencers kind of overnight, and they're getting so much more traction and publicity than in the past that was reserved for our entertainment people and celebrities in the world and politicians. So now that you have anyone becoming an influencer, it seems that their entitlement is also a bit different than in the past, right? And they don't necessarily appreciate what they have. So can you expound on that?
There's two layers to it. One, in working with a lot of brands and also working with a lot of influencers, is that I find it mesmerizing and embarrassing for large brands when I chat with 19-year-olds that have more followers across all their social channels and will generate more impressions, which this isn't about social media. This is like what your brand is, because if you're not spending on programmatic and all these other media, it's like, where are you actually being seen? And, with retail going away, are you even seen on the shelf, or is it, done through one of the 30 apps that exist that can do that and so on. So that's one side of it. Is I find it embarrassing that corporations with billions of dollars will let 19-year-olds with a decent camera just flat out beat them in this media game. And then, the flip side of it is that entitlement. I don't think it's one of influence and nor barrier to entry, because I think low barrier to entries are actually really beneficial, because if that entitlement remains ultimately, then even if there's a lower barrier to entry, it means you get in, and then your entitlement is going to be the reason you're ultimately going to lose within that, because at some point it will bite you in the ass. I don't really think entitlement's the problem within the influencer, nor just like low barrier to entry space. I think it's just a problem of what happens when the world is in a better place than we've ever seen before. And I say that at a macro level, obviously not this year in particular. But the reality is, for those born in the United States, within the Gen Z demographic and even millennial, there's never been an easier time